So the story is told of a monk who was traveling down the road one day. He was carrying some materials, some items that he was going to sell at the market. And beside the road, he came upon a crippled man. And the man called out to him and he said, "Would you carry me into town? Could I go to the market with you today?" And so he picked him up and he carried him all the way into the market. He set him down there in the marketplace and set up his booth, and he started selling his items. After a moment or two, he sold his first item. And the crippled man asked, "So how much did you sell it for? And would it be okay if you bought me a cake?" He said, "Sure." A few moments later, he sold another item. And the crippled man called out to him again and he said, "How much did you sell that one for? Could you buy me another item?" And the monk said, Sure, I can do that." Well, the same scenario just repeated itself throughout the rest of the day. And at the end of the day, the monk was kind of gathering up the last few little items. And the crippled man calls out to him again and says, "Hey, can you give me a ride back to where we met? You mind giving me a ride back to the roadside?" And the monk says, "Of course I would." So he carries him all the way back to the roadside. And he sets him down on the side of the road. And the cripple looked up into his eyes and he gave this blessing. He said, "You are filled with divine blessing in heaven and earth." When the monk looked into his eyes, he recognized something for the first time. That he was looking into the eyes of an angel disguised. An angel of the Lord was right there before him. We remember the scripture passage from Hebrews chapter 13, verse 2. "Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some people have shown hospitality to angels without even knowing it." And so we're left with the question, when is it that the stranger that is sitting beside us, the person in need, when is it that that person is an angel in disguise? Well, this morning, we continue on in a teaching series. We've been drinking from a well of wisdom over these past few weeks, provided by this book. Henry Nouwen is a scholar. He used to be a professor at Harvard and Yale and Princeton. He is considered to be among some of the foremost in this area of what is called spiritual formation. Now, spiritual formation essentially is a call. It's a call that every disciple answers, every follower of Jesus answers, and that is to be someone who pursues a maturing faith. That we're always stretching, we're always growing, we're always deepening ourselves. That's what spiritual formation is all about. That's what all of us are called to, is to a deeper, more mature faith. And what Nouwen says is that most of the time spiritual formation happens not with stages or steps, but with movements. He talks about movements from one thing, maybe letting go of one thing and moving towards something new. And today, we're actually finishing up our series with this last section, and it's talking about a movement. He calls it the most mature movement. This is Nouwen's words. The most mature movement is a movement from exclusiveness to inclusion, from exclusion to inclusion. Now, when I say those words to you, they probably kind of carry some baggage at different points. All of us kind of know what exclusion is. We kind of know what exclusion feels like. Exclusion is primarily and I did a lot of kind of linguistic work around just that word this week, and it always carries this sense of looking towards the external. It looks at the external, and it asks the question, who will I exclude from my circle, from my group? Who should be excluded? Now, inclusion is very, very different. Inclusion looks inward. It's not looking primarily external, but it's looking inward. And it asks the question, who am I called to include in my circle or in my group? So, Nouwen suggests that moving from exclusion, this kind of primarily external viewpoint, and who am I excluding, to inclusion, which is inward, and who should I include? He says that it requires us to do something. It requires us to offer radical hospitality. Radical hospitality. Now, some of you know that over in the sanctuary, we have our value statements that are on banners on the wall, and radical hospitality is basically the exact same, the exact same value as extravagant welcome. So that's on our wall over there. So we're a community that kind of aspires for this already, that we would be a place of extravagant welcome or radical hospitality. So as we unpack that, I want to just ask you a question. When I was telling the story of the monk and the crippled man, what are some of when you consider those two different characters, how did they come across to you? Did you have any responses to the way that story played out? How did you feel about the monk? Let's start with the monk. How did you feel about the monk and his role in that simple story?
I was waiting for him to get angry.
Oh, hey, I think that's very valid. Yeah. Well, why do you think he would get angry?
Because this person seemed to be taking advantage of him.
Yeah, kind of maybe a little bit annoyed. Come on, buddy. And maybe this monk needed some boundary training, right? I mean, to where he wouldn't get taken advantage of, right? Manipulated. Did you kind of feel a little bit of that for the monk? I mean, where's enough, right? It's true. It's true. And legitimate, to be honest. Very legitimate. How did you feel towards the cripple? What were the emotions? What were the observations of that person in need that kept asking over and over? Have any emotions towards the cripple? Huh. There we go. Uh-huh. Oh, wow. Sarah, thank you for sharing that. That's something I didn't even consider. I love that. That is fantastic. Well, here in the community, we have a guy that makes his way from church to church. Well, let's call him Jim. That's not really his name, but we'll call him Jim. Jim is known kind of like a con man. He makes his way from church to church. His face is actually on the wall. It's on bulletin boards and administrators' offices, because every few weeks he makes his way to a new church, or maybe to all the churches. We're not really sure. But he has a new story. He has a new need that he presents. And so we have to all decide, we have to all kind of try to discern, how do we respond to somebody like Jim who is needing something over and over and over? And it's really, really easy to kind of fall into that exclusive lens where you're just looking at Jim on the outside, and you see, oh gosh, Jim's coming up, and boy, Jim doesn't seem like he's in a very good mood, and yeah, here it comes. Jim's asking for something else from us, and it's real easy to kind of fall into that place where we're almost kind of judging Jim, and we get to the place where we're kind of thinking, well, okay, there's Jim. Am I going to help Jim today? Are we gonna, is Jim worthy? Like, do I feel like Jim is worthy? Like, he is this story like, and so we fall into this place, and it's a legitimate place. I've worked as a social worker. I had to be in this situation on many different occasions where a story was told to me, and I had to discern, like, okay, so how do I help? What is my place? But it's easy to fall into that place, right? Where we're looking at the person that we run into occasionally that might be on the side of the road, and we're trying to decide, and it's not like we don't think, are they worthy or not, but we kind of, we grab for our wallet or I don't know. Have you been in that place? Yeah. It's hard. Every single one of us is in that place. I want to say that's a legitimate place. I'm totally there with you. But I have to ask the question, what if the monk is trying to teach us a deeper lesson? What if it's a greater lesson? What if it's a bigger lesson? What if we're not just wandering through life and we happen to fall into to come into contact with these different people? What if we're following a calling? What if we're following a calling into something bigger, that we're connected to something bigger, that we're included in something bigger? And I wonder how that would influence the interaction that we have. And it doesn't mean that we have to empty our wallet to that person, but maybe that calling would inform the way that we encounter that person in need in a different way. Would it shape our hearts? Would it form us a bit? I have to confess something. The other day, Jim, it was probably 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, Jim came, and end of the day on Friday, we're not even open on Friday, the office is dark and kind of locked down, and Jim comes at the end of the day, and I was about to leave, and I was kind of been a long week, and I was kind of tired, and I looked through the blinds, and I saw Jim standing there. And I thought to myself, well, today, am I going to help Jim? I kind of fell into that whole exclusive kind of mindset of looking at Jim, and I kind of basing what am I going to do, but by just looking at Jim, and then I walked back into my office, and I saw Jim get on his bike and take off down the road. And I had this ping in my heart because I knew that we were never able to help him every single time. But it was only just like 2 or 3 minutes later, and you remember the day here in Kingwood where there was this deluge of a rainstorm, where the heavens opened, and literally that was 2 minutes after I saw him riding down the street on his bike. And I thought to myself, I had this it just wrenched my heart. And it reminded me of what this teaching is all about. Like, if a calling, like what I was called to do in that moment, wasn't giving him a gift card or things like that we do, or helping him out in some other kind of monetary way, but it was to help Jim have refuge that day. And I couldn't help but think of Jesus' teachings when he said, whoever offers a cup of water to a stranger, whoever offers them something to eat, whoever offers a blanket to place around their shoulders, and then here's the one, whoever welcomes in the stranger. I think that Jesus invites us into a place where we have to discern through the eyes of a calling, through the lens of a calling. We aspire to do that as a community, to practice extravagant welcome. And that's not an easy goal. A community that tries to do extravagant welcome. Community in and of itself is kind of a exclusive term, right? when you're a part of a community, you're included in a community, then there's kind of a belonging, right? That's a part of that term. And yet we're trying to be a community, a tight-knit community with arms wide open. You see the tension between those two things? At the same time as kind of remaining a place that is just tight-knit and feels like family, and that's how we talk about ourselves. We also have got this wide open-armed calling. And we see Jesus model that to us over and over and over. We see the tension between it. Now points to something that is necessary for us to be a community of extravagant welcome. And that is to address our theys. Is to dismantle the people and the groups that we refer to as they or them. Kind of like stepping on toes. I know, I'm stepping on my own toes. Who's the person or the people that you refer to as they or them, as opposed to we and us? Sorry about that. I mean, is it just so simple as to say conservative, liberal, or is it Democrat, Republican? Yeah, what would you say, Susan? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Those are good questions. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. 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 Jesus refers to that person often as stranger and neighbor. Those are the two words that Jesus always uses for that person that we don't know. We know so little of their story. And so sometimes they fall into that category. They fall into the they category. Yeah, Vincent? Oh, okay. I mean, that's a lot of people, right? Yeah. So, yeah. He said anybody who doesn't agree with him on Facebook or Twitter. That's those people out there. They. How about how many of you raise your hand if you would consider they to be Yankees fans? Hey, oh, right there. Yeah, you would include them as the they. Cowboys fans, maybe, as if you're a Texan fan. Nowen writes this. I think it's such a beautiful encouragement for us. He says, Christian community is a place of forgiveness and celebration where we are all more similar than different. What if the heart of Christian community was about forgiveness, a recognition that we're all flawed? Every single one of us are flawed, and we need forgiveness. We need forgiveness. And then celebration. Celebration of who God is. Celebration of our neighbor beside us too. As an equal sister, brother, family member of faith. And that they're so much more similar than they are different. What I hear in this statement is about solidarity, right? It's about our shared humanness and the kind of healthy community that Jesus envisions for us. We're all imperfect. We need forgiveness and acceptance. This is a life-giving epiphany. So I want to read from Thomas Merton. he talks about this solidarity. He talks about a moment, literally. He describes a moment. He was at the corner of 4th and Walnut in Louisville, Kentucky in 1958. So he knows exactly when he had this epiphany. Suddenly I realized that I loved all people and that none of them were or could be totally alien to me, as if waking from a dream, the dream of separateness. What more glorious destiny is there, since the Word was made flesh and came to a member of the human race and became to a member of the human race? The illusion of separateness. That is so powerful to me. Are we waking from, are we dismantling this illusion that we're separate from each other, that my decisions don't impact you at all, that they don't connect to you and yours don't connect to me, that we have no kinship together, that we're not connected in any way, we're separate, we're individuals? The Be the Bridge experience, for those of you who don't know, Be the Bridge it's a partnership that we have with an African American congregation down in Humble. And we've been sharing this relationship and hearing each other's stories and learning about racism and prejudice from them. But one of the gifts, the many, many gifts that I've received from that relationship is they've helped me dispel this illusion of separateness. We're not separate at all. We're connected in so many different ways. Don't forfeit this gift. And so, as we come to the communion table, friends, I want to point us towards what will happen next week. Next week, we will enter into the Christmas season. And we'll celebrate again this incarnation mystery. We remember in John chapter 1, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. God became human in the birth of the Christ child. In his body, God was pleased to dwell. And you remember what Jesus said after he had lived his life and showed us who God was. God's heart, God's mind was on full display. Then he said, no, I'm not the incarnation anymore. You are. In all your diversity, in all your uniqueness, in all your difference, you're the incarnation. You're the light. The circle is always meant to get bigger. Wider is the way. So let's draw a wide circle around this table this morning.